Hello and welcome to Darker Days, Darkling number 18. Pretty sure that's the right number, but I haven't checked. For tonight's episode, Chris, what are we going to be talking about?
We're going to be talking about something that is related to our normal topics of choice, which is all World of Darkness games, but instead we're going to look at something which I think players will appreciate and maybe learn something from and enjoy, and it's in the same kind of vein as those games, and it's Unhallowed Metropolis Revised Edition. So we basically, I kind of follow on Twitter and on Facebook one of the writers for Unhallowed Metropolis, who Simon Berman, who also works for Privateer Press on the War Machine and various other war games that they do.
Cool.
And so he threw me the revised PDF so we could have a read through and obviously review it for the people of the listeners of Darker Days.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk through really, and see really what they've implemented in this game. There's a lot you can also take back from playing that game and use in World of Darkness games, and really for storytelling in general.
Yep, and this is the perfect weekend to be talking about that, the weekend of the Grand Masquerade, right?
Yeah. Well, considering there's so much going on with that, then we've got to wait for all the information from that to sink in, and obviously so we have time to drag Mark back from hell so we can talk about it. Which there is some interesting news, but we're going to leave that until we've had time to really mull it over.
Indeed.
So, where to begin? Obviously, I've had a good read through the revised. I actually own the first edition hard copy, so I can also make some comparisons between the two. Mike, you've had a bit of a read through then as well?
Yes, I've read the setting chapter, chapter 1, and then also the antagonist chapter, which is chapter 5. And I did kind of look through the different occupations a little bit, so I'm aware of what's going on there.
Okay, cool. So I guess we really need to do a really kind of shotgun kind of overview of the game. We can say a few more things that I didn't include in my written kind of review of it. But what do I say quickly? Unhallowed Metropolis is a alternate future, post-apocalyptic, dystopian, neo-victorian, creeper-graphic, bloody splatterpunk zombie horror game with gas mask, corset-wearing chic. That pretty much sums up the game in a nutshell, but there is a lot more to it. Where do we begin with what there is more to it? Basically, history in Unhallowed Metropolis diverges from our own around about just after the turn of the century, the end of the 19th century, and so before World War I even happens. And the main event that shakes the entire world is the dead coming back out of their graves, shambling about and killing people. And the main problem with this is not that there's zombies going about killing people in possibly the worst possible time in history, when there is lots of pollution and hygiene is an issue, and there's very cramped conditions, and you also have the issues to do with upper class versus lower class society. You also have the fact that this plague, which causes zombies to rise up and eat brains, is not a normal plague. It's passed by bites, but they find that even those people who die, who are never bitten by zombies or anything to do with that, also come back from the dead. And this then leads to a setting where the dead have to be destroyed upon sight, and that's generally through incineration. But before there's about, they discuss maybe about 100 years worth of setting where everything happens, the world crumbles apart, and there's this slow regrowth of society and the fortifications of cities into these, well, what can be basically described as megacities that are constantly blanketed with soot and ash and smog from the continuing burning of bodies. Obviously, I go more in the written review, but that's a good overview. So, Mike, what other things did you pick out that seemed quite cool about the setting?
Cool about the setting. I liked the kind of wasteland effect that was going on,
Mm,
where pretty much all the wilds are now tainted and they're no longer good for farming or growing crops. There's a lot of the ghoul tribes which are
yes.
wandering around in the Northlands. Because it's basically centered in London.
Yeah.
It gives you some information on other areas, but
Yeah,
not
they
really enough.
they they give some nice discussion about different European, how different areas in Europe react to the this great plague, and also other places in the world. Like you only have to read upon, like, I would hate to see games set in, say, Africa with the, say, a group of settlers that have somehow survived in those colonies there at the
Hmm.
time. But the thing they do get in. They are planning. I've had word expansions, which focus on Europe, on some of the other empires of Europe from that time period that obviously go through the same kind of neo-Victorian changes. Um, so yeah, yeah, the wasteland effect's quite horrific. But yeah, the majority of the game is based in Unhallowed Metropolis, and they have in London, and they have expanded that since first edition, or the descriptions of other areas.
Hmm. Hmm. And there's also some interesting, I don't want to call it science. We'll call it pseudoscience.
Mm.
Like how they feed everyone in the city of London with that. I think it's called SCOP. Basically the bacteria you use in water treatment process.
Yeah.
And apparently it's really gross, but it's all they've got. The other interesting thing, actually going back to the wasteland effect, is that the wasteland is expanding,
Mm. Yeah.
even though the people are able to take back land and territory. They're really being constricted and limited by that, which causes there to be lots of these isolated cities without anything in between them, which
Mm.
makes travel extremely dangerous.
But on the note of travel, they do go into a description how there's this period of time within the setting which is known for each region. They have their own period of what they call the reclamation, where they go back into the cities, because the cities are such well, nightmarish places to take back after the first zombie outbreak, and they slowly reclaim them. They do a kind of a, well, they basically just have to clear the area out of zombies and fortify it, and keep doing that. But to connect the cities, they, especially in the UK, the Great Britain kind of part of the setting, they have these, they make use of the railways, and it even describes how the railways actually, because they become these fortified steam engines that are going up and down the country, they actually act as a way of controlling, as partially controlling the zombie population, because
Hmm.
the zombies congregate around these hoping for a cheap meal, and then suddenly a train rushes by and squishes however many hundreds of zombies, which is a ridiculous kind of scene to think of.
Hmm. Hmm. And
And of
then
course,
they,
there are many. I was going to say there are many cities that are not even reclaimed yet, which are known as necropolises. So,
yeah, I like the fact that they hose down the trains as they come into a station to get rid of the
yeah.
smell. Yeah, that's a good one. There's some humor in here as well, which is pretty cool. I definitely enjoyed
Mm.
that as I was going through the history. There's some nods to like science fiction movies, like with the SCOP, they allude to Soylent Green, for example,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty fun. My only, I don't really want to call it a criticism because I think they did a good job with the history in this case, but you find a lot in like gaming books. They go through with these like huge story arcs, and they go in with little, very precise minutiae and detail, and
Mm.
they describe each year as history goes on, which a lot of the times is really just gaming drivel or writer drivel.
Yeah.
I think they did a good job though with this because it gives you a bunch of different solid time periods to go into, and you can explore those if you wish.
Yeah.
For example, I think the initial period with when the outbreak of zombies first occurs would be really cool to play in, and even the reclamation just after that seems very interesting.
Yeah, you definitely have different ways you can play it, and by taking those kind of like flashpoints in the setting. Um, I mean, no, it's quite as you said, it's a detailed history they've given for it, and it'll be interesting to see to what level they detail the histories of other locations around the world. So what sort of treatment they give the US, or they give Prussia or France. I mean, France is one thing I've already picked out in the setting, which seems to have a more of a has definitely a more of a mystical feeling to it, with what they talk about the renewal, the kind of the reinstatement of the court of the Sun King, and how he's this, obviously you only have to read between the lines, and there's this obvious vampiric lord who commands all of France. So that's great. Have you looked through much of the rules? The rules are I would say, fairly friendly.
No, I haven't. Not really.
Well, in a nutshell, if you want to do anything in the game, you roll a 2d10, add your stats, does it beat a difficulty, and there you go. That's it. So it's very the bulk of the rules is very light. Combat, I would say, is a bit more involved. Maybe somewhere between, say, New World of Darkness system and, say, Exalted, in the level of complications in there, because your characters can have so many, as you said, you mentioned occupations, they have so many kind of like feats and features that you can get, which are kind of like specialist skills, especially if you've got a combat heavy character. There are many of these they can pick up, and especially for different types of weapons. And so it can become quite involved in that sense. The rundown of the things you can play in the game, you've got things that, as you said, the game you can play at different points in history. You can also play the game in different ways, which we'll get into. So you can play the basic occupations are a doctor, a detective, a mourner, which is this guild of basically a guild of zombie killers who are employed by the aristocracy to watch over the dead. So the majority of the dead go to crematoriums, but the aristocracy see themselves above that, so they bury their dead, but they get mourners who they pay to solemnly sit there for days upon end, silently watching to see if their dead grandfather wakes up, and if he does, they decapitate him in a clean and in a civilized manner. And so they're like basically ninja gothic Lolita. That's the only way you can kind of describe them. You've got undertakers, who are kind of like bounty hunters to take out zombies and other creatures that are within the setting, which we'll discuss in a bit. You've got Death Watch soldiers, who are the elite soldiers who go about killing zombies. You've got criminals, which just says exactly what it is, and you've got vampires. So the setting does include the character concept of half vampires. So either you've basically been bitten by a vampire, but you've not died, so you become a full vampire. You've somehow survived your encounter with them. And combat is really mean. I've seen, playing through the first edition, it's quite horrific. And the book contains a whole list of critical injuries you can have happen to your characters, so it's kind of colourful in what can happen to you.
Oh, very nice.
What else is there for the game? Well, as well as combat being colourful, there is a ridiculous plethora of weapons, ranging from the rather simple things of like rifles with scythes on the end of them for cutting down zombies, obviously, to Tesla cannons and electromag guns, which are carried around by hand because the setting contains Tesla coils, so it's got the idea of free energy, and so your gun is being constantly charged from Tesla coils around the city, which is, and they use these on outside of the perimeter walls of the cities to take out the zombie hordes. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the book in that way. Of course, the main thing in the book is the monsters and the zombies themselves. So you said you've had a look at the antagonist section as well.
Oh, yep, definitely.
And so, what was your view of what they've presented there?
Well, it goes into a lot of detail, and I've been really impressed by it. There's a lot of information. It gives you, kind of like if you remember the old like AD&D second edition like monster manual, which gives you like all the like what the monsters eat and all that kind of stuff, and goes through their habitat. It's got that kind of like detailed information, but even more, it goes on for pages and pages about each antagonist type. And there's more than just zombies, as you can see. There's vampires, which you mentioned. There's oh geez, I can't remember the name of them right now. The things they make, the super soldiers.
Yeah, so you've got as you said, you've got zombies, and they give different versions of zombies depending upon how fresh the corpse is, which is great. I said you've got vampires, which again are broken into more feral vampires and more sentient, kind of the classic, vampires that we know from Vampire, who kind of are more kind of have an aristocracy behind them. You mentioned the super soldiers, so those are known as throats. So they're the classic. They're essentially werewolves or Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing going on. What other ones were there? Ooh, they've got something that's the equivalent of Prometheans. So the classic, made from various body parts. They've got something that's more like a perfected superhuman that's just grown from scratch. That I believe that one's known as the Anathema or Mercurial Man.
Yeah, those were weird.
Yeah. They go a bit insane, really.
Yeah, and they have the devilish face, correct? Yep.
And again, with most of these antagonists, there's multiple different ways you can put them together and things that can go wrong with them. And there's also what else is there? They suggest different secret societies. So there's something which operate in the background, because obviously there's this very Victorian view on how you should use science and how you should and shouldn't mess with the dead. So there's quite a lot of the aristocracy want to live forever, but that's considered a bad thing. So it goes a lot into the technology and pseudoscience behind that. What's not in the book, I think it's important to say, that's not in the book, is any rules for ghosts or that kind of thing. And there's a good reason for that. The first edition only had one supplement book for it done, which was Unhallowed Metropolis, that covered ghosts and seers and mediums. So that will be having a revised edition very soon, I'm led to believe, literally by early next year at least, and so that will add more bad guys into it. Yeah, so I think we covered most of the types of antagonists in there. I think that's the important thing, is it's not just about zombies, and you can easily go down a very limited way of playing the game if you were to see it that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So, obviously, zombies are a major feature of the game, so there's always this fear that another zombie outbreak could occur in the city, and you'll be caught up in that, and there'll be a lockdown of that area of the city, and the Death Watch soldiers will come in and basically annihilate anything that moves. And once they're sure the place is cleared up, they'll come back in. But I think more important than killing zombies when that type of thing happens, and killing them as they occur when they just seem to come back from the dead when you're least expecting as your characters are doing whatever they're doing. I think one of the main features of Unhallowed Metropolis is that very that ever-present fear that there could be at any point an outbreak where you are. So you could be wandering down the street and there could be a body of someone that died of exposure under that pile of rubbish, and they could come back from the dead. Or you could suddenly hear the alarm sound for a lockdown, and that kind of really plays into the atmosphere of the game. But as I said, that's part of the atmosphere, even though the story that you're wanting to play out isn't about killing zombies all the time. It could be something something deeper than that. So the game also gives a brief description of neo-victorian society and the importance of how the upper classes interact with the lower classes, and scandals, and how scandals are an important thing to introduce into the game. You got anything more to say on that one, Mike? Or I mean, what ways have you seen how you would what type of games you would like to play with it?
Well, actually, funny you should mention that. When I was looking through the antagonist section, reading about the vampires, and it kind of hinted towards this in the settings section. The rules in this game are perfect for running something like Anno Dracula by Kim Newman, which is a fairly well-known author over in the UK. It's pretty hard to find his books in the US though, and it really the rules play to that very well. I noticed a lot of similarities right there. So I would probably actually adapt the rules to run that, because that's a really cool setting. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that story.
I'm not, but I'll chase that one up. Yeah.
Basically, Dracula becomes the prince. He marries Queen Victoria, and pretty much comes into power. Then it's this sort of sequel to Dracula, but things didn't go so well for the heroes of the original story. Yeah, so that could be cool. It's interesting that you bring up that zombies are this ever-present thing, this aspect to the atmosphere. But I think something to warn people about is to not really use them too much unless it really enhances the story. Don't have like zombie random encounters and that sort of thing. Because I don't think the rules are really set up too much for combat. It's supposed to be a bit more of a free-form game, I'd say, with a lot more of the social wheeling and dealing. It's really about just how far society can break down. So that's kind of the story that you want to focus on.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's good you say that, because I mean, many of the antagonists that I think it's kind of trying to get at should be it's not the obvious, and it's not about random encounters with another zombie or a random encounter with ghouls who live in the sewers and undercity. It also, as you say, the main focus is about the breakdown of society and how corrupt it can be. So there's a section in the book that talks about the new killers and murderers of the time, because when you have society in this locked down city with this ever-present horde of flesh-eating monsters outside, and an ever-increasing gap between high society and low society, people go crazy and will do things. And often the most crazy thing to face is a human who's gone mad, not the obvious monsters. It's better to kind of like focus on more social aspects of the game and how they're being corrupted. And of course, one of the main features of the rules is the idea of corruption. It's this rule system where if you want to get if you want to re-roll your dice, or a kind of a get out of jail free card. So if your character's dead but you don't want him to die, the system is set up that you can dodge those bullets to your character if you are willing for your character to become more corrupt, and in turn, the more corrupt they become, the more times you can re-roll dice, but at the cost of their own sanity and their own physical uh, mutation. So the game is basically going, go on, you want to shoot that guy, you want to take him out and have this over with him. But if you're going to hit him, you're going to have to re-roll that dice, and you're all out of re-rolls. And the only way you can get another re-roll is become more corrupt. So, as a storyteller, as I have been for the game, I have watched players go, yeah, okay, I'll have that extra dice roll. I'll have that, please. And that's hilarious. It's just, it's amazing how far down that road players will push their characters, and that's kind of half the fun. Your characters are gonna, it's fun to see them become corrupt and how far you go down that route.
Another very interesting thing about this setting and like how you could run the game is if you do want to have more combat, definitely focus on the Death Watch and kind of the military, because when society broke down, it was just before World War One. So that's the kind of like hierarchy and I don't want to say technology, but kind of the tactics that they have. In fact, when they're fighting these zombies, it's almost like trench warfare, except instead of being in trenches, they're behind a barricade or a wall.
Yeah.
And they expand these walls out as they're like retaking a city. So you can really play that up and have it used as kind of a foil to World War One itself, with these unending hordes charging at you, and really just being stranded in this one place.
That would be, it would be, you could play a really horrific level of gameplay with that, and the type of stories you could play, because again you can really contrast with a game like that, say the visceral kind of splatterpunk gore you could have with that type of game, but then you could have their you could almost play like when they're taking back behind the lines for at least a little bit of R&R and to gain their sanity back and deal with the repercussions of this ever constant grind of zombies that they're facing, and how that is slowly shattering the fragile psychology of the soldiers.
Yep.
I mean, that's something I've actually I've picked up with another game, which I think is maybe deserving of a review. Is again a game called Cthulhu Tech, where again you can play mech pilot. You're playing these mech pilots, and though the game is not very fast playing, it's I think with where you've got an opportunity to role play and play out these really kind of epic clashes, and this level of ultra violence. That maybe the most interesting thing is not always playing the ultra violence, but by looking at the repercussions of that upon your character's psychology and how they interact with people, and how as they do more and more missions, they're actually becoming more and more of a monster relative to the society they're trying to protect.
Yep, indeed.
So, is there anything more I can say? Not much more really, other than comparisons for book comparisons. I'll say there is a large improvement between the two. The new version has a nice, a well laid out index and kind of pointers to rules. The rules themselves and the book overall has a better layout and is more readable. So you know how you can get a bit of a soup con going on with some books these days, where they go, "Oh, that looks like a nice background to our text," and you can't read it. They've kind of fixed that with this edition, and so it's a vast improvement in that respect. And they also include a wonderful map of this alternate future London, which is really useful because it has things marked upon it like where crematoriums are and Tesla towers, and where each of the defensive walls are. And they'll have obviously a way, a glossary of the terms and some a really quite extensive bibliography, really, of various books on Victorian society and death. So all in all, I think the revised edition is a great improvement on the game, and I'm just kind of now eagerly looking forward to the next slew of expansions that I think they've been planning since 2007. Because I think that's when the first edition came out. So yeah.
Great, great.
So what can we say for World of Darkness players? What can they learn from this? I would say the main thing is kind of like the gameplay element and how I think again as we said, the idea of like zombies being this kind of ever-present background and how it's a threat, but you don't present the threat all the time. It's more of the idea of this threat that could occur. And I think that's maybe quite useful for people that are playing, say, something more like World of Darkness Mirrors and doing, say, a post-apocalyptic setting for that. So whether it's post-apocalyptic with zombies or post-apocalyptic where there's aliens and you're playing the resistance of some form, and maybe it's useful for I don't know, maybe it's useful if you want to have a little bit of a light-hearted attitude towards Victorian society. I don't know, but it's definitely good fun, and I think people who like World of Darkness games will pick it up and be able to churn through it. I think it's also a great introductory game and something you can play a bit more. How I'd say. A bit more relaxed, so you can pick it up and play a story through, and then go back to your normal Chronicle and then you can play another episode. It's kind of fast and fun in that sense, or you can play full-blown Chronicles with Unhallowed Metropolis.
Cool.
Any last words from you, Mike, on what your overall view or other things you would do with it?
Yeah, if you're looking for an alternate like setting for Promethean, this is great. Absolutely. Especially because it already has the wasteland effects in there, so you could have them expand on that, the Prometheans, the created, or you could just remove that aspect of them and just work with the horror. Because one thing I was actually thinking about is, what if the zombies don't attack the Prometheans and they're like obviously rather tough beings, so they're one of the best. They can definitely save humans and save humanity, but they're ultimately just rejected. And they themselves really aren't that evil, in some instances, I should say. So it just brings some interesting and alternative ideas and themes to Promethean created.
Oh yeah. That would. I mean, that fits with the idea that it could be. You could use Unhallowed Metropolis as a great kind of setting resource for mirrors. And however you apply that to any of the World of Darkness games, really. I mean, again, if you wanted to go down that route, you're almost possibly into like, if you looked at, say, Mage Chronicler's Guide, which we're going to be doing a review on anyway, that has a bit on where you mess about with Mage and how its rules work, and you kind of go with the idea of like enlightened science. So mages are just doing super science, but that kind of fits with the idea of the themes presented in Unhallowed Metropolis, where you're working towards this new cutting edge of science to kill the zombies out there and to save society. But of course, people can also use science for completely nefarious reasons. But I like the Promethean idea. That really fits. That's a really good fit there. I would say one of the funniest rules I've seen in Unhallowed Metropolis, a wonderful thing. So it has a kind of like a merits and flaws thing, like from Old World of Darkness. And so you can kind of see where this game kind of grows from, what kind of inspiration it's taken in its creation. And one of my favourite merits is and flaw is taste bad and taste good. So if you taste bad, zombies seem to ignore you and go for everyone else. Or if you taste good, zombies pick you out and go for you.
Nice.
And that highlights just the tongue-in-cheek element to the game. It completely admits that it's a bit ridiculous and stupid in places, but that's half the fun. And of course, the one word we've not used in any of this review is anything to do with steampunk.
Yeah, that's right. You kind of berated me before for saying it was steampunk, which it isn't, but it's almost got that feel.
It's Victoriana. but
Yeah.
it's not. But because it's got Tesla technology and so forth, it's not really steampunk. And steampunk's become far too much of a nebulous term to describe anything that has a top hat and some form of technology.
Indeed. All right, very
Right.
good. So, Darker Days Radio definitely is looking for more Darkling podcasts coming this fall. I know we're all very busy right now.
Hmm.
Chris, you're going to be going off to Germany. I'm pretty busy with
Yes.
school, so definitely if someone wants to contribute something, shoot us an email with like an MP3 of your submission over to darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. And it's also a great place to send us any feedback or suggestions. We always like to hear that kind of stuff. And if you want to follow us on Twitter or just tweet us, Darker Days Radio on Twitter. And the other place to follow us is, of course, Facebook. So Darker Days Radio on Facebook. That's pretty much all I got to say. Thank you, Chris, for the excellent review of Unhallowed Metropolis. Pretty interesting game. Definitely one of the more unique settings that I've seen for a role playing game recently. It's definitely something to check out.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we post a link to the written review. So by all means, if you want to comment on that, I think we've already posted up the link on the Facebook. That'll take us to our Posterous site, which is something that's working. If people want to comment there, by all means, and ask anything that way, or start chatting about anything, by all means, please chat there, because it'd be great to have some sort of Darker Days community spring up fully fledged somewhere. So yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you all very soon.
Goodbye. Steps you normally take for things, and that way, obviously, if we need someone to do it, i.e., me, then that's possible for future once I'm all established in Germany. Yeah, cool. Okay.
Chris,
I'll
I
leave.
just recorded that because you sounded like Optimus Prime.
Oh
Like,
right,
totally
brilliant.
robot.